Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DOE Office of Indian Energy's program review. It's our first ever virtual program review. Obviously, it's a little different than normal. So just quickly, I know that those of you who have seen or participated in other sessions have heard the introduction, so I'm going to abbreviate it here. First, I just want to say, for those I haven't met, my name is Lizana Pierce. I'm the deployment supervisor for the Office of Indian Energy, and I'm responsible for executing the deployment program, which is financial assistance, technical assistance, and education and outreach. James Jensen, who's second from the left on the bottom picture, he will be moderating our Q&As at the end. Next, next slide, please. I wanted to introduce one of the newest federal staff members. Although he's been a part of our team for quite a while, it's Tommy Jones, and he will be providing 5-minute reminders to our presenters to make sure we stay on time. And so far, we've made it through almost 3 days without a hitch, and I'm so surprised. But anyway, okay, going on. Another one of my colleagues, Miss Tweety Doe, is a project officer, and for quite a few of the projects that you've seen presentations this week. Let's see. Just a brief update. We are a very small office consisting of 9 federal employees, which is like more than twice as many as the 4 federal employees we had a year ago in November at the program review. We are supported by a team of 8 total contractors, 2 at headquarters and 6 in Colorado. We do have a couple other new members, a couple folks in DC that support Director Frost, and Alan Pribilof, who has just recently joined us along with Tommy. Alan is duty stationed in Anchorage and will help implement the technical assistance for some Alaska villages there. Okay. Next slide, good. So here's a picture of our team as of last November. As I said, there are a few folks that are missing. And let me just go over that. Since last November, Givy Kokonowski has taken a senior policy advisor position with the office. He does remain duty stationed in Anchorage, Alaska. And he has recently been joined by Alan Pribilof, who's sort of upon getting hired, has returned home to Alaska. Brant Petrasic, not shown here. He came from DOE's Office of Environmental Management and has a history of working with tribes. He joined the office as a senior advisor duty station in Washington, D.C. We have a couple additional federal team members who joined Director Frost in D.C., Quintella Wilson, who's our budget officer, and Paulette Toole, a new management analyst. And as I said, Tommy Jones has recently become a federal employee, so we're keeping him. On the contractor side, not shown, we have Jessica Becker, who joined the deployment team in Colorado as a project monitor, supporting some of the grants and agreements you'll see this week. So before we jump into the project presentations, let me go over some event details. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available on DOE's Office of Indian Energy website in a couple weeks. We will also post copies of the slide presentations soon, shortly. Not sure what that means at the moment. Probably pretty quick. So everyone also will receive a post-event email with the link to the page where the slides and the recordings will be located. Because we are recording this webinar, all phones have been muted. We will answer written questions at the end of the final or third presentation of this particular session. You can submit a question at any time by clicking on the question button located in the webinar control box on your screen and typing in your question. For presenters, again, if you're not presenting, please stay muted. And because we're on a tight timeline, because of this new platform format virtual that we have, as I said, Tommy Jones will sort of break in at 15 minutes and give you a 5-minute warning. Hopefully that doesn't sort of break your stride. And next, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so just a little bit about why we have the program review. Actually, we started these in 2002, a long time ago, it seems, but part of the reason for that was, at that time, it seemed like a lot of tribes were operating sort of islands enough themselves, and so, part of the motivation is to sort of bring tribes together to learn from each other, which is much more powerful and I think effective than listening to us, but also to provide a venue for networking. It's an opportunity as well to share successes and lessons learned. But it is a requirement of the grants to do this, and I usually in person. We do it live, which is much more fun. But we do urge you to submit questions, and hopefully we can have a little bit of interaction here as well. So going to, I don't know, slide whatever, Monica, 17 or something thereabouts. So this is the 9th session. It'll be the last session for today, the 3rd day of the review. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, each of the last sessions was for Alaska projects. These are some that I oversee as project officer. Tomorrow will be a somewhat abbreviated day, but I think Tweety said there was like 21 as of the last session, 27. Anyway, we've had a lot of different presentations by projects all across the nation, and today, this session, you'll hear 3 more Alaska-based. They will include Natalie Hansen will tell us about Nuvista Light and Electric Power and their partnership with Quifluc and their energy storage project. Patrick Baker from Pribilof Islands will give us an overview of their improvements, energy efficiency improvements, retrofits to their community store. And then we have, I don't believe Michelle is with us. We'll have Reese and Brian Hurst tell us about Unalakeet's microgrid optimization for tribal community resilience. And with that, we're going to bring up Natalie's slide deck, and I'm going to toss it over to you, Natalie. It's all yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Lizana. As Lizana mentioned, my name is Natalie Hansen, and I am the Executive Director of Nuvista. Our DOE grant is a partnership between Nuvista Queef Incorporated and the Organized Village of Queefluc, hence the name of our project, which is Nuvista Queef Energy Storage. I did want to take a second to mention that we also have on this call George Guy, who is our main local project contact in Queefluc, and he is our eyes and ears and our visionary. And Bertha Prince, she is the Energy Program Manager for Nuvista. So thank you all for tuning in today. Most of you, we can go back a slide. Sorry, Monica. Most of you listening today are aware of the information on this slide, but I wanted to include it for the archive version of the presentation. Our project in Queefluc is funded under the Department of Energy, Office of Indian Energy, Energy Infrastructure Deployment on Tribal Lands. We created a tribal energy development organization for this project. It is made up of 3 organizations, that is Nuvista Light and Electric Cooperative, Queefluc Inc., and the Organized Village of Queefluc, and our period of performance is October 1st, 2019. So we just finished up 1 year through September 30th, 2023. Next slide, please. I'm going to first take a few minutes to explain the 3 parties involved in this project, starting with my organization, Nuvista. We are a nonprofit cooperative created by tribal nonprofit energy organizations and Alaska Native stakeholders of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta of Alaska. You will hear me refer to that as the YK Delta going forward. The goal is to help our people find energy opportunities that carry our culture and traditional way of life into the future. Our mission is to achieve a more resilient and connected region while empowering our communities with access to affordable, sustainable energy infrastructure. We see our role as advocating and working on behalf of the people of the YK Delta, and we will have succeeded when we have attained affordable, sustainable, and reliable energy for every community in our region. Next slide, please. I am providing this map to give you all a sense of the scope of working in the YK Delta. The YK Delta of Alaska is in the west-southwest area of the state and is made up of 56 federally recognized tribes covering 58,000 square miles, an area larger than the state of Iowa. It is where the Yukon River and Kuskokwim rivers dump into the Bering Sea, and it is one of the largest river deltas in the world. Approximately 85% of the 26,000 people in the region are Alaska Native, mostly Yupik and Athabaskan. Next slide, please. Our work at Nuvista focuses on locally driven energy planning and education, community-based energy efficiency efforts, and energy generation and transmission projects. Currently, we are working with local entities to install a wind-diesel hybrid system in Queeflup in parallel with the energy storage project that I'm presenting about today. While the wind-diesel hybrid system is not the focus of the presentation, I think it is worth mentioning as it's relevant to our goals. Next slide, please. We created a tribal energy development organization for this DOE-funded project. DOE defines a TEDO as any organization of 2 or more entities, at least one of which is an Indian tribe, that has the written consent of the governing bodies of all Indian tribes participating in the organization to apply for a grant, loan, or other assistance. I get asked that a lot, so that's why I wanted to include it in here. Our partners in the TEDO are Queeflup Incorporated, which is the for-profit village corporation for its shareholders. The shareholders are the people of Queeflup. Queeflup Inc. is the entity that obtained surface rights to land under the Alaskan Native Claims Settlement Act. And Queeflup Inc. owns and operates the electric utility, a local store, and is a fuel distributor in the community. Additionally, the Organized Village of Queeflup is one of our partners. They are the federally recognized tribe for the community, of which there are 229 in Alaska. OVK administers all tribal programs for its members in Queeflup. Next slide, please. In Yupik, Queeflup translates to Bad River. The community sits at the confluence of the Kuskokwim River and the Queeflup River, just 11 miles east of Bethel as the crow flies. It is considered a lower Kuskokwim community. On the map on the slide, you can see the exact location of Queeflup, which is 386 miles west of Anchorage. Next slide, please. Queeflup is a larger YK Delta community with 756 residents as of 2018, and the population is growing, having seen an increase of 5% since 2010. We can demonstrate the population growth by looking at the median age, which is just 23.8 years old. With such a young population, Queeflup's leadership is motivated to invest in their energy future. I would be remiss if I didn't describe some of the economic situation in Queeflup and other villages in the YK Delta, though. The median household income in Queeflup is just $44,000. The figure on the slide is actually just a little bit off, as I found a more recent and accurate value after sending my slides in. Approximately 26% of Queeflup's population sits below the poverty line, compared to the Alaska statewide average of 11.6%. The cost of energy in Queeflup is exorbitantly high across the board. A gallon of gasoline is $5.83, a gallon of heating fuel is $5.56, and the unsubsidized cost of electricity is 52 cents per kilowatt hour. What this can demonstrate for us is that just about any improvements on the cost of electricity will help this community. Next slide, please. Now, I'd like to get into some more specifics about the DOE-funded project in Queefluck. Nuvista Energy Storage has received funding for the installation of an ABB 500 670 kilowatt e-mesh power store battery energy storage system. Is that a mouthful or what? Into the Queefluck power plant with two primary goals right off the bat. The first goal is to improve the tribal community's energy resilience and security, which will improve residents' quality of living and food security, as well as provide energy during emergency situations and outages. The second goal is to provide grid stability to supplement the addition of renewables to the Queefluck system. We are working with Intelligent Energy Systems as our contractor. They were not able to be on the call today, but we work very closely with IES. The photo on this slide is the last barge of the 2020 summer that was just arriving in Bethel in late September. When you zoom in really, really close, you can see several components of our project headed to Queefluck. Next slide, please. Currently, Queefluck is generating electricity in a standalone power plant with 3 diesel generators. Their peak load is 450 kilowatts, and the average load in Queefluck is 180 kilowatts. They have an average of 9 outages per year. And our initial goal with this battery energy storage system is to decrease the impact that those outages have on local tribal facilities and customers by providing a source of power when there is an outage, whether or not it's planned. Currently, as a separate effort, we are installing 4 100 kilowatt wind turbines with an estimated production of 200,000 kilowatt hours per year for each turbine. Later in the project, the battery energy storage system will provide grid stability to supplement this wind generation. In the photo on the slide, you can see one of our local employees in Queefluck standing next to the battery energy storage system casing. There are no batteries in it yet, and he's on top of the platform that was constructed just adjacent to the power plant. This photo was taken in October, so just a few weeks ago. Next slide, please. During outages, the battery energy storage system will provide emergency backup power for tribal buildings. Some of those will be the power plant so that operators can complete necessary repairs to get the generators back online, the local clinic, the Head Start building, and other tribal buildings and offices, and even residential customers to prevent the thawing of subsistence foods stored in freezers in homes. The capacity of the battery means that it can provide 3 hours of power for limited essential services or 1 hour of power at the community's average load. Next slide, please. We are excited to say that we have made considerable progress in 1 year and that COVID-19 has so far not impacted our ability to make progress. However, we anticipate this winter will be slower going than originally planned due to the pandemic. So far, the design is 100% complete. The battery energy storage system casing and building materials arrived in Queefluck by barge in early October 2020. And then we hired locally to build and install the shelter and platform for the battery energy storage system adjacent to the power plant. The photo on the slide is the battery casing in the barge landing area when it first arrived in Queefluck in October. The remaining noteworthy tasks that we have to complete are the construction and installation. We're waiting on some power plant controls upgrades to happen early next year before we can move forward on this. Shipping and installation of the batteries into the casing. And then finally, 12 months of monitoring following the commissioning of the battery system in Queefluck. Next slide. Koyana Chaknak for your time today. I've included my contact information here, as well as our local partners and points of contact, George Guy of Queefluck Inc. and Senka Guy the tribal administrator of the organized village of Queef. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Natalie. That's great. It's great to see the stuff arriving and understand the challenges of getting it there. Next, I'm going to invite Patrick Baker, and your slides are up, so anytime you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to present today. My name is Patrick Baker. I'm the Executive Director for the Aleut Community of St. Paul, federally recognized tribe. I've been working in this position since about 1996. I think I should mention that in St. Paul, our local corporation, TDX Power, TDX Corporation, work together with the city on power generation and distribution. So many of our projects focus on, tribal projects focus on efficiency and retrofits. Our project, in this case, was a deep energy retrofit to our Aleut community store, which is a tribally owned and operated grocery store. It's the only grocery store in St. Paul. We were replacing the project was to replace the refrigeration equipment with a target goal of saving $44,000 per year in energy, and ultimately to lower the cost of goods and the price to the consumer for freeze and chill products. At the time of this presentation, we are essentially complete with the exception of monitoring. We went into this project with a budget of around $1 million, and we ended up at $1.1 million. Next slide. A little bit about St. Paul. It's a federally recognized tribe. We have about 390 members, 80 employees. Most of our economy is fishing and tourism. Our annual budget is $14 million. Half of that comes from government type activities and the other half in retail and construction. We maintain offices in St. Paul and Anchorage. I'm currently located in Anchorage. I started my career off, the first 7 years of my career off with St. Paul, living in St. Paul between 96 and 2003. Retrospectively, our energy cost for diesel is much less than what the previous presenter had. We were fortunate to have a deep water port, and our electric cost per kilowatt is 49 cents. Next slide. Our mission, our economic mission in St. Paul is to build the local economy and raise the quality of life. That starts with increasing money coming into the community, circulating it, and strategically investing it. The Aleut Community Store is a strategic acquisition in 2017. We acquired the store from a Canadian company called Alaska Commercial, working through a subsidiary called Alaska Commercial that was operating our local grocery store. Upon acquiring, or prior to acquisition, we were exporting about $1 million of economy to Canada, and so the tribal government purchased the grocery store and has been operating it since. Next slide, please. We are, of course, located in the middle of the Bering Sea, a very remote location in Alaska. However, there are some advantages to our location with supply chain as far as logistics and having a year-round ice-free port that allows for deep water transportation of goods. Next slide. The store itself is a picture of our community. You can see the new harbor there. You're seeing about, I don't know, about a third of the housing there, but the store is located very centrally. In the harbor there, you see the small boat harbor, Trident Seafoods, and our local CDQ Fishing Association are the two large buildings on the waterfront. But we serve the whole community. We're the only store in the community. Next slide. A lot of our, St. Paul has a long history with the federal government and a lot of federal investment. And a lot of our infrastructure is very old. This is actually a picture of the store around 1950. At the time, the Aleuts were, effectively slaves of the United States government. There's a book called The Slaves of the Harvest that gives a lot of history about that, but it's not really a retail, doesn't look like a retail facility because it wasn't at the time. At the time, Aleuts would come to the left-hand side of the store there and basically were ration food like a company store would in support of the fur seal trade that the United States government was operating in. So It's an old building, and it doesn't really look like a retail building, but it's what we have, and it's sort of representative of a lot of infrastructure that we have in St. Paul. Next slide, please. Here's a picture of kind of what the store looks like prior to this project. This was probably taken about a year ago. The project was to replace the refrigeration. This refrigeration that you see was installed in 1996. I was actually there when this was installed, but it was hand-me-down or used equipment taken from Nome, that Alaska Commercial moved from Nome to St. Paul when they took over operation of our store. Next slide. Of course, being the owner and operator of the store, we wanted to get the cost down so that we can ultimately improve pricing. This chart just shows the distribution of energy and electricity, the dominance of electricity in the store operation. Next slide, please. Within that category of electricity, you can see where refrigeration was the major component of, and why we were focusing on that. I think when we acquired the store, we did an energy audit, so I have some information about that on the following slide, but refrigeration was the major focus of the energy audit, and this slide represents that. Thanks. Next slide. Looking at that energy audit, we got our baseline data. Again, it shows sort of the the large cost associated with the refrigeration, electricity, as well as provided us some priorities for payback plans, energy savings. We've accomplished the lighting already, and this project addressed the refrigeration. Thank you. Next slide. As I said, our project was substantially complete at the end of September. As of now, it's 99% complete. We're in a monitoring phase. The good news is we're seeing some really significant savings. There's a couple of tables there on the left. You see a summary of sort of the October 20 versus October 19 impacts on electricity, and then November, which was the first full month of operation under the new refrigeration system, and we're seeing a net 40% net change in savings there, as far as, which is very significant. I think one of the things that in part of our project, we were relocating some heating units, and we had a phased heating project going into this project. We were going to relocate the exchangers in coordination with this new refrigeration system. When we got into it, like rehab, you open things up, you encounter things. At the end of the day, we ended up replacing the entire heating system. So a two-phase project turned into a single-phase project, and we completed the heating concurrently with the refrigeration, and therefore we're seeing a pretty significant net savings from heating as well. And finally, I included a floor plan of the store, and this wasn't fully understood until we got into it, but because we relocated our heating, some of our heating infrastructure in the building, we were able to add an entire aisle, which, in context of the pandemic, it increased food security and enabled us to put more products on the shelf. Had some, it was a positive outcome we didn't anticipate going into the project, but ended up in our favor. Next slide. Okay. This is a chart just showing sort of the electric consumption over the years. We monitor in all our facilities. We have a graph like this that shows how much kilowatts we're using or gallons of diesel we're burning. But I really want to focus on October and November, and I think the trend here is that upon sort of acquisition of this facility, the store facility, you can see the impact of sort of our efficiency projects, and starting with from left to right, you can see 18, 19, 20, 21. You can see the trend is moving in the right direction. Starting with our lighting project, we did some basic heating project efficiencies, and then I think we were tuning adjusting motor speeds and things like that. And then this last year, you can really see the effect of 2021 on the energy savings from this current project. So we're very happy to see this. Next slide. Just some pictures here. This is a picture of the new rack supports the refrigeration system. It's all very modern. It's hooked up to the internet, so it can be monitored from acreage. Gives us all the alerts and things that will help us avoid, problems or shutdowns or emergencies. Next slide. This is just a photo of the control system. Very modern. Yep, thanks. And here's the condensers. And when these condensers came in, it was all one unit, and we had to split the condensers. That was a small, unanticipated. They weren't designed to be split. They didn't arrive. They can be split, but they weren't designed that way. We had to do that in the field. Okay, next slide. So here's some pictures of sort of the final product. Community is very, very happy with the new refrigeration in the store. It has LED lights and all kinds of controls to help maintain temperature. Next slide. Another example. Next slide. Next slide. New produce cases helped us expand our offering in produce. Challenges and lessons. Okay, so I think, we targeted this project for last year. We had a government shutdown in 18-19 that delayed. It was only a month or two. It delayed our award, but it, with logistics in Alaska, a month or two really matters because there's limited season. There's certain times a year we can do work. So it pushed us into 2020. That was one of the challenges as far as, the schedule being pushed out. Logistics, anywhere in Alaska is challenging. I think one of the things that we've learned in St. Paul is we take a little bit of more control over the coordination of logistics. We are the experts in logistics to St. Paul, so that ended up benefiting the contractor and the project. A challenge, like I mentioned earlier, we're doing some rehab of relocation of a heating loop. We encountered some asbestos piping. At the end of the day, we ended up with a larger expanded scope on the heating relocation that ultimately led to replacement of the entire heating system, including all of the asbestos, and which was handled by a licensed contractor and properly disposed of. And finally, of course, COVID. In our case, I think we did a pretty good job here to minimize them. There were some challenges as far as the social distancing and things like that. One of the things we did is we had provided additional housing to the contractor and extended quarantine space to the workspaces. So by alternating shifts or organizing work so that proper quarantine could be maintained, so that we weren't paying contractors to sit in a house for 14 days before they could conduct work. We just figured out how to include the workspace as part of the quarantine area. And yeah, all said and done, it had some impact, but we were able to maintain schedule and get the job done. I think that's it. And the picture is a challenged employee of the contractor who managed to drive one of our trucks off a cliff, and needless to say, he was asked to leave the island.
Guess you won't be loaning trucks to contractors anymore, huh?
No, our contractor has been really amazing. They're Wolverine Inc., and they've been an excellent group to work with. The other truck there is my boss, the president. he's an avid hunter, and it's never good when somebody drives a truck into your hunting grounds. So anyways, but thank you very much. This project really, I think some of the results that, that we're hoping to get to reduce cost of goods, maybe for refrigeration chill by 10% is it's a really significant impact when you're talking about a gallon of milk that costs 14 bucks, or, I couldn't be happier with the results that we're getting. I think we're actually achieving better results than what we projected. So again, thank you very much for your time and support.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick. It's great to see some of those numbers and the savings and, the impacts to the community. So thank you again. Next, I'm going to invite, I don't see Michelle on the line, so I think it's going to be Reese and Brian to give us, and it's all yours, guys.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Reese, I'm the general manager at Unalakeet Valley Electric Cooperative, and I'm representing Unalakeet Native Corporation. Our community is very thankful for this award, and I'll be sharing these slides, and Brian at the end will share a few of our challenges and some of the things I may have missed. Next slide, please. This is our location. We're on Norton Sound. So we're in Western Alaska, as the other two presenters also were. Next slide. Yeah, Unalakeet, it's about 745 residents, and you'll see we're also home to one Eskimo Ninja Training Center. We have our remote location is about 400 air miles west of Anchorage. This was complicated this spring when our main commercial regional airline went bankrupt. It also affected numerous villages in Alaska, but at the time they were our only direct air carrier to Anchorage. And after a few months of charter only service, we now have an additional air carrier with regular service to Unalakeet, but it's been a challenge navigating quarantine protocols and trying to keep our community safe and still get work done. We are close to Nome, relatively speaking, 150 miles, and that's another commuter flight to Nome and then to Anchorage, but it adds more expense to our projects and our needs. Next slide, please. You'll see here Unalakeet Native Corporation's profile. They are the awardee in this project, and they're also the third biggest electric customer for our cooperative. They've been a cooperative member since UNC was organized. We do have a long relationship with this, with UNC and UVEC, as I stated, and it is a lessee and lesser relationship. They own the land under our tank farms and our wind farm, and we lease with them, and they were very supportive of developing the wind farm. And in terms of their operations here in Unalakeet, they operate all the fuel sales, they have a grocery store, they have a restaurant, they have a repair garage, they do heating oil deliveries, and their COVID impacts include, definitely a decrease in revenues from loss of food and fuel sales. There's been basically no tourism in our community this year, and it's added cost, and they've had transportation difficulties in their day-to-day operations. Next slide, please. Unalakeet Valley Electric Cooperative is the contractor in this project, so that's where I come in. Our grid is currently powered by 4 diesel gensets and 6 wind turbines. We have a recovery heat system. So we do keep our 1 million gallon water tank for the community warm and heat some municipal buildings, the school district building and school campus. Next slide, please. Our wind system has been operational for almost a decade now. It was built, or construction was broken. They broke ground in 2009. And we've had some challenges. It has performed less than it was predicted to perform at. Since the 2011 commissioning, we have had fuel savings, and wind penetration levels have reached 25%. However, we have had unanticipated power quality issues, and that's led us to have to curtail some of our wind generation periods. And as a result, those predicted outcomes at the beginning of the project, and this is a renewable energy fund project with the state of Alaska, have not been fully realized. Next slide, please. So we reached out to others, including, Alaska Energy Authority and the contractors who were originally involved in the project, and we're really coming up empty. So we continued our appeals, and we found out about the DOE Office of Indian Energy Technical Assistance Program, and that, with some additional funding from Cooperative, our not-for-profit tribal organization in our region, we did a wind diesel study optimization, and really were able to dive in and find out how come we can't go to one diesel mode, or what will it take to bring our production to the next level. We didn't want to be complainers because we have had significant savings in fuel, reducing our input by about 70,000, our import of about 70 to 75,000 gallons of fuel each year, but we know we could do better. Next slide. So our rates are about 50 cents a kilowatt hour before power cost equalization subsidies. So they are quite high, similar to. So this picture actually shows some of the team that was put together from the technical assistance original request to Office of Indian Energy. And these are the boots on the ground who really put the wheels in motion for our current award. Next slide, please. So our award and project outcomes are on this slide. And you can see the task force identified 2 primary changes that we could implement to get us to these outcomes. What we anticipate by increasing our voltage in part of our system and doing some switchgear and SCADA control changes, we're going to increase our wind penetration from basically 25% to 40%. We're going to save approximately another 44,000 gallons of fuel annually. We're going to stretch the intervals of annual maintenance and overhauls for our diesels, reducing our diesel maintenance costs, reduce emissions, and once again, become less dependent on diesels. But it also then sets the stage for what do we need to do to get to 100% diesels off. Let's continue on the next slide, please. So our task force and these studies have been completed, and modeling has been done on our power line, on our failed capacitor bank in the plant, looking at our current boiler controls and SCADA. And we do now have a plan to deal with these reactive power problems that we have that currently require us to operate our gensets in pairs. So by increasing the voltage, we can basically go to one diesel operation, and it's great bang for our buck. But to get there, we have to do some significant infrastructure. enhancements. Next slide. So once again, the objective was to try to find out what's going on with our existing equipment and how to get to the next stage of renewables and energy storage. Next slide. The study helped us articulate the problems, examine alternatives, and made some ranked recommendations. And the big finding was that if we increase our voltage, we're going to reduce our line loss significantly. We're going to eliminate the voltage drop at the plant. And over time, just by increasing our voltage, it's going to save the annual power output of an entire 100 kilowatt wind turbines annual production. Next slide, please. So here's some more head scratching going on during the assessment stages. Next slide. We're going to have a little bit closer view here of our community. Once again, we are coastal. Our wind farm is on the top of a ridge. So when you'll see the northernmost or uppermost pinpoint, it's where there are some, where our wind turbines are located actually. So we have about a 2.5 mile sectional line from our powerhouse to our wind turbines. And it was insulated to 15 kV standards, but we only energize at 4160. Next slide, please. So the power line upgrade project, which is the key part of our microgrid optimization, is that we're going to handle and remedy our current voltage drop problem and line losses. So we'll be able to get to one diesel mode. Next slide. So far, our progress has been less than rapid. We have completed our survey. We have completed the study. We have not gone to procurement yet for our poles, transformers, and conductor that will be required. We expect that once we don't have to deal with the kVAR reactive power variations, we will then be in a position to select either a BES or some other type of energy system to go to diesels 100% off. That's what our community members will be best served by. And UNC and UVAC are committed to going diesels off, even if it's just for short periods to deal with the intermittent nature of our winds. Next slide, please. Once again, here's our summary of our priorities. One is to upgrade the power line and increase the voltage. Next slide. And two, improve the SCADA and our data management systems. The second piece is the cheaper piece, but it needs to be done before it needs to be done after we do our voltage upgrades or concurrent. Next slide, please. Our progress and future plans slide here. See, we've addressed items 1 through 5. We have additionally surveyed the routing, identified the infrastructure, but for item number 6, we were experiencing a COVID slowdown, but unfortunately our lead engineer, our consulting engineer for our utility, passed away in August. And unfortunately, we lost him before we could go to procurement and select our subcontractors. So we are at that point in the process. So we're dealing with that. We're actually having to recreate some of the information, the field work necessary for procurement. As you can see here on item 7, we did lose transportation options to Anchorage, but it is being restored. So number 8 is where we're at this moment. On the right side, you'll see we did successfully build a new segment of line that'll help support future growth in our community, and all new construction is being built to a higher voltage standard, which this is one of the phases. So at this time, I would ask Brian to add a little bit more to what I've missed. We have about a couple minutes left.
Yes, and pardon the interruption. There is 5 minutes left. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Reese, and everyone for your attendance here today. So I'm Brian Hirsch. I think I am number 2 there on this slide, project manager selected. So I've been working very closely with Reese, the overall electric utility, and the Unalakeet Native Corporation to move forward on this project. And so just very briefly, maybe just restating a few things in a few different words. What we found, or what was happening in the community, was when there was additional wind on the system, so the wind kicked up in the community and more wind turbines would turn on, or they would start spinning and putting out more power. When that would happen, normally you'd think, oh great, we have wind going on, our power consumption, our diesel generation is going to go down. But what in fact was happening was, because of the way the power line constraints were with the lower voltage, in order to address supporting the wind turbines, there resulted in a voltage drop that Reese was talking about. And the upshot of the whole thing, without getting into the technical details, was that there was more requirements on the system for what's called reactive power, or KVARs. And KVARs were really only able to be created by the diesel generators. And so what would happen is, when there would be more wind on the system, you would actually need to turn on a second diesel generator, whereas at times the community could be run on a single generator. There were many times when 2 generators were running, but nonetheless the wind turbines required the generators to run harder and consume more power. And the goal, of course, was to go in the other direction. So this whole short-term goal of increasing the voltage here was, whenever there's a lot of wind on the system, almost always from just a sheer load or energy demand standpoint, the village ought to be able to be run on one single diesel generator and then the wind. And the generator can be moving up and down based on how much load is going up and down and how much wind is varying. But right now we're not seeing that. So that's really the goal from the power line voltage expansion. That should address the major issues there. So there's 2 things, right? The wind turbines will be producing more, and then that will also result in less demand from the diesel generators. So that's number 1. And then number 2 is getting a handle on that within the power plant, from what Reese was mentioning of the SCADA, the Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition System, is really all of the electronics and computers monitoring the whole system. And right now, when you go into the Unalakeet power plant, there's 3 or 4 different computer screens that are monitoring different parts of the system. And what we're planning on doing is kind of bringing that all under a single umbrella, so there's a single hierarchy and decision making that the computers are doing, and again, smoothing out the whole operation. So that's really the goal here. And once you do all that, then you could get to the point of what Reese was talking about here, adding batteries and additional controls, so you can go. Our goal, the big picture is going from 2 diesel generators to 1 diesel generator to no diesel generators. And of course, we'll not have no diesel generators all the time because the wind isn't blowing all the time, etc. But whenever there's enough wind, Unalakeet has a good enough wind resource and enough wind turbines that you ought to be able to turn the generators off at least some of the time. So that's the trajectory here. That's the path we're aiming for. And the funding that DOE is providing and what we're currently operating under will get us those first 2 out of the 3 steps. So I guess that would just be my background additions there. That's what I got.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Well said.
And again, just great, tremendous thanks to DOE and the team here at Unalakeet. There's been a lot of challenges from COVID and increased costs for flying people out there, and a couple diesel generators have blown up or just gone belly up long before their planned lifetime was expected. And it's really sort of a function of the gensets themselves. No unplanned maintenance or anything like that. They just haven't performed as expected. So there's been a lot of additional challenges and issues, and I think we're kind of getting out ahead of all those or dealing with all of them. And now we're really ready to focus on putting this team back together and completing the remaining items on the work plan. So that's what I got. Thanks, folks.
Anything else, Reese?
No, thank you, Brian, for going over the technical aspects in a much more rapid and coherent fashion. Thank you.
All good.
Okay. With that, thank you, Reese. Thank you, Brian. Again, I want to thank Natalie and Patrick as well. And I'm going to turn the virtual floor over to James, and he's going to moderate the Q&A session. James, you're on.
Lizana. Okay, well, thank you. Looks like we got a good amount of time for questions, so please submit questions if you have any, and we should have time to ask them. A first question here. Vista, on your project, it looked like the battery case was delivered, but not the batteries themselves. Can you just explain why the batteries are not delivered, and if there's any challenges in delivering those batteries? Do they have to be delivered by barge, for instance, versus aircraft?
No, that's by design, and we just can't really anticipate. Because of now we have anticipated delays, we can't really just keep the batteries in the field that long. So as soon as we have everything hooked up, we will have the batteries sent out by air. They're in Anchorage.
Great, thank you. And I think you eventually touched on this, Patrick, but the refrigeration savings, it looked like the last month was 41% over the previous year. Is that in line with your expectation for the project going into it? And then similarly, the heating savings were about 5%. Can you elaborate on the source of that? You replaced the heating system, but is it more higher efficient boiler, or what's the source of those savings? Patrick, you're on mute. I'm not sure if you're trying to talk. Patrick, if you're there, you can click on the microphone icon next to your name. We'll move on and see if we can get Patrick a little later. moving to the Unalakeet project, what sort of reliability have you seen with the turbines? They've been operating for, I think you said 10 years. And what's their expected remaining life?
Yeah, James, this is Reese. Our reliability, the hardware has been really, really excellent. We haven't had any mechanical issues that couldn't be fixed either on turbine or, on site without a major crane. We're a direct drive system. We have monthly checks and, daily monitoring at our plant, and also from a contractor monitors them remotely. So we're able to get ahead on maintenance. That's been quite nice. Our annual maintenance and monitoring costs less than the maintenance and monitoring on one single diesel unit, so we're confident that we're going to get another good 15 years out of our current models. We just did a vibrational analysis this year on all of the bearings, and things look really good. So we're optimistic, and we have had some software issues, some controller issues early on. I came on as general manager after they were commissioned. So my goal has been, to maintain the system that was put in and make it operate to the fullest extent possible.
This is Brian. I'd also add just very briefly that the single biggest expense of building and installing these wind turbines is probably the foundation. And the second one is bringing a crane in for the beginning part of it. And the foundation's not going anywhere. Even if the nacelle, the top part of the wind turbine over, say, 25 years, you're spinning forever and ever, that will wear out. But with the foundation still there, theoretically, you could replace the nacelle portion, and with much reduced cost compared to the first time around. So hopefully, even if we do need to replace the nacelle part, they have maybe 50 years with a full-on replacement of the top portion.
Great, thank you both. Patrick, are you available? Seems like we still don't have Patrick. With that, Lizana, we don't have any additional questions. We're here at the end of our day, and questions are petering out, it appears. So I think we can wrap it up. Great.
Again, I want to thank the presenters for this session, and all the presenters, because it's been wonderful. Not as fun as being in person. As Tweety says, there's no good snacks and all that stuff, but we'll make do this year. So again, thank you, Natalie, Patrick, Reese, and Brian. And I would invite those to come back tomorrow. We have a shortened day tomorrow, but we do start at 11:30. So if you're interested, you will need to join using the link and the call-in number that was provided for that registration for that particular session. And with that, I think we'll call it a day. Thanks again, everybody. Goodbye.